Part 2, 9.2 Lectures and Discourses, 9.2.1 The Women of India, New Discoveries, Volume 2. The following lecture was delivered at Cambridge, December 17, 1894, and recorded by Miss Frances Willard's stenographer. Swami Vivekananda faced bigotry in America on several issues of Indian culture. One was the Indian woman. Naturally, he sought to correct Western misconceptions. When he lectured in his own country, however, there was no greater advocate for improving the life of Indian women than the Swami. In speaking about the women of India, ladies and gentlemen, I feel that I am going to talk about my mothers and sisters in India to the women of another race, many of whom have been like mothers and sisters to me. But though, unfortunately, within very recent times there have been mouths only to curse the women of our country, I have found that there are some who bless them too. I have found such noble souls in this nation as Mrs. Old Bull and Miss Sarah Farmer and Miss Frances Willard, and that wonderful representative of the highest aristocracy of the world, whose life reminds me of that man of India, 600 years before the birth of Christ, who gave up his throne to mix with the people. Lady Henry Somerset has been a revelation to me. I become bold when I find such noble souls who will not curse, whose mouths are full of blessing for me, my country, our men and women, and whose hands and hearts are ever ready to do service to humanity. I first intend to take a glimpse into times past of Indian history, and we will find something unique. All of you are aware, perhaps, that you Americans and we Hindus and this lady from Iceland, Mrs. Sigrid Magnusson, are the descendants of one common ancestry known as Aryans. Above all, we find three ideas wherever the Aryans go: the village community, the rights of women, and a joyful religion. The first idea is the system of village communities, as we have just heard from Mrs. Bull concerning the North. Each man was his own lord and owned the land. All these political institutions of the world we now see are the developments of those village systems. As the Aryans went over to different countries and settled, certain circumstances developed this institution, others that. The next idea of the Aryans is the freedom of women. It is in the Aryan literature that we find women in ancient times taking the same share as men, and in no other literature of the world. Going back to our Vedas, they are the oldest literature the world possesses and are composed by your and my common ancestors. They were not written in India, perhaps on the coast of the Baltic, perhaps in Central Asia, we do not know. Their oldest portion is composed of hymns, and these hymns are to the gods whom the Aryans worshipped. I may be pardoned for using the word gods. The literal translation is the bright ones. These hymns are dedicated to fire, to the sun, to Varuna, and other deities. The titles run, "Such and such a sage composed this verse dedicated to such and such a deity." In the 10th chapter comes a peculiar hymn, for the sage is a woman, and it is dedicated to the one God who is at the background of all these gods. All the previous hymns are spoken in the third person, as if someone were addressing the deities. But this hymn takes a departure. God, as the Devi, is speaking for herself. The pronoun used is I. I am the Empress of the universe, the fulfiller of all prayers. This is the first glimpse of women's work in the Vedas. As we go on, we find them taking a greater share, even officiating as priests. There is not one passage throughout the whole mass of literature of the Vedas which can be construed even indirectly as signifying that woman could never be a priest. In fact, there are many examples of women officiating as priests. Then we come to the last portion of these Vedas, which is really the religion of India, the concentrated wisdom of which has not been surpassed even in this country. There too we find women preeminent. A large portion of these books are words which have proceeded from the mouths of women. It is there, recorded with their names and teachings. There is that beautiful story of the great sage Yajnavalkya, the one who visited the kingdom of the great king Janaka. And there in that assembly of the learned, people came to ask him questions. One man asked him, "How am I to perform this sacrifice?" Another asked him, "How am I to perform the other sacrifice?" And after he had answered them, there arose a woman who said, "These are childish questions. Now have a care. I take these 2 arrows, my 2 questions. Answer them if you can, and we will then call you a sage." The The first is, what is the soul? The second is, what is God? Thus arose in India the great questions about the soul and God, and these came from the mouth of a woman. The sage had to pass an examination before her, and he passed well. Coming to the next stratum of literature, our epics, we find that education has not degenerated. Especially in the caste of princes, this ideal was most wonderfully held. In the Vedas, we find this idea of marrying. The girls chose for themselves, so the boys. In the next stratum, they are married by their parents, except in one caste. Even here, I would ask you to look at another side. Whatever may be said of the Hindus, they are one of the most learned races the world has ever produced. The Hindu is the metaphysician. He applies everything to his intellect. Everything has to be settled by astrological calculation. The idea was that the stars govern the fate of every man and woman. Even today, when a child is born, a horoscope is cast. That determines the character of the child. One child is born of a divine nature, another of a human, others of lower character. The difficulty was, if a child who was of a monster character was united with a child of a god character, would they not have a tendency to degenerate each other? The next difficulty was, our laws did not allow marriage within the same clans. Not only may one not marry within his own family or even one of his cousins, but one must not marry into the clan of his father or even of his mother. A third difficulty was, if there had been leprosy or phthisis or any such incurable disease within 6 generations of either bride or bridegroom, then there must not be a marriage. Now, taking into account these 3 difficulties, the Brahmin says, if I leave it to the choice of the boy or girl to marry, the boy or girl will be fascinated with a beautiful face. And then very likely all these circumstances will bring ruin to the family. This is the primary idea that governs our marriage laws, as you will find. Whether right or wrong, there is this philosophy at the background. Prevention is better than cure. That misery exists in this world is because we give birth to misery. So the whole question is how to prevent the birth of miserable children. How far the rights of a society should extend over the individual is an open question. But the Hindus say that the choice of marriage should not be left in the hands of the boy or girl. I do not mean to say that this is the best thing to do, nor do I see that leaving it in their hands is at all a perfect solution. I have not found a solution yet in my own mind, nor do I see that any country has one. We come next to another picture. I told you that there was another peculiar form of marriage, generally among the royalty, where the father of the girl invited different princes and noblemen, and they had an assembly. The young lady, the daughter of the king, was borne on a sort of chair before each one of the princes in turn, and the herald would repeat, "This is Prince so-and-so, and these are his qualifications." The young girl would either wait or say, "Move on." And before the next prince, the crier would also give a description, and the girl would say, "Move on." All this would be arranged beforehand. She already had the liking for somebody before this. Then at last she would ask one of the servants to throw the garland over the head of the man, and it would be thrown to show he was accepted. The last of these marriages was the cause of the Mohammedan invasion of India. These marriages were specially reserved for the prince caste. The oldest Sanskrit poem in existence, the Ramayana, has embodied the loftiest Hindu ideal of a woman in the character of Sita. We have not time to go through her life of infinite patience and goodness. We worship her as God incarnate, and she is named before her husband, Rama. We say not Mr. and Mrs., but Mrs. and Mr., and so on, with all the gods and goddesses, naming the woman first. There is another peculiar conception of the Hindu. Those who have been studying with me are aware that the central conception of Hindu philosophy is of the Absolute. That is the background of the universe. This absolute being, of whom we can predicate nothing, has its power spoken of as she. That is, the real personal God in India is she. This Shakti of the Brahman is always in the feminine gender. Rama is considered the type of the absolute, and Sita that of power. We have no time to go over all the life of Sita, but I will quote a passage from her life that is very much suited to the ladies of this country. The picture opens when she was in the forest with her husband, whither they were banished. There was a female sage whom they both went to see. Her fasts and devotions had emaciated her body. Sita approached this sage and bowed down before her. The sage placed her hand on the head of Sita and said, "It is a great blessing to possess a beautiful body. You have that. It is a greater blessing to have a noble husband. You have that. It is the greatest blessing to be perfectly obedient to such a husband. You are that. You must be happy." Sita replied, "Mother, I am glad that God has given me a beautiful body and that I have so devoted a husband. But as to the third blessing, I do not know whether I obey him or he obeys me. One thing alone I remember, that when he took me by the hand before the sacrificial fire, whether it was a reflection of the fire or whether God himself made it appear to me, I found that I was his and he was mine. And since then, I have found that I am the complement of his life and he of mine." Portions of this poem have been translated into the English language. Sita is the ideal of a woman in India and worshipped as God incarnate. We come now to Manu, the great lawgiver. Now in this book there is an elaborate description of how a child should be educated. We must remember that it was compulsory with the Aryans that a child be educated, whatever his caste. After describing how a child should be educated, Manu adds, "Along the same lines, the daughters are to be educated, exactly as the boys." I have often heard that there are other passages where women are condemned. I admit that in our sacred books there are many passages which condemn women as offering temptation. You can see that for yourselves. But there are also passages that glorify women as the power of God. And there are other passages which state that in that house where one drop of a woman's tear falls, the gods are never pleased and the house goes to ruin. Drinking wine, killing a woman, and killing a Brahmin are the highest crimes in the Hindu religion. I admit there are condemnatory sentences in some of our books, but here I claim the superiority of these Hindu books, for in the books of other races, there is only condemnation and no good word for a woman. Next, I will come to our old dramas. Whatever the books say, the dramas are the perfect representation of society as it then existed. In these, which were written from 400 years before Christ onward, we find even universities full of both boys and girls. We would not now find Hindu women, as they have since become cut off from higher education. But at that time, they were everywhere pretty much the same as they are in this country, going out to the gardens and parks to take promenades. There is another point which I bring before you and where the Hindu woman is still superior to all other women in the world, her rights. The right to possess property is as absolute for women in India as for men, and has been for thousands and thousands of years. If you have any lawyer friend and can take up commentaries on the Hindu law, you will find it all for yourselves. A girl may bring $1 million to her husband, but every dollar of that is hers. Nobody has any right to touch $1 of that. If the husband dies without issue, the whole property of the husband goes to her, even if his father or mother is living. And that has been the law from the past to the present time. That is something which the Hindu woman has had beyond that of the women of other countries. The older books, or even newer books, do not prohibit the Hindu widows from being married. It is a mistake to think so. They give them their choice, and that is given to both men and women. The idea in our religion is that marriage is for the weak, and I don't see any reason to give up that idea today. They who find themselves complete, what is the use of their marrying? And those that marry, they are given one chance. When that chance is over, both men and women are looked down upon if they marry again. But it is not that they are prohibited. It is nowhere said that a widow is not to marry. The widow and widower who do not marry are considered more spiritual. Men, of course, break through this law and go and marry, whereas women, they being of a higher spiritual nature, keep to the law. For instance, our books say that eating meat is bad and sinful, but you may still eat such and such a meat, mutton, for instance. I have seen thousands of men who eat mutton, and never in my life have I seen a woman of higher caste who eats meat of any kind. This shows that their nature is to keep the law, keeping more towards religion. But do not judge too harshly of Hindu men. You must try to look at the Hindu law from my position too, for I am a Hindu man. This non-marriage of widows gradually grew into a custom, and whenever in India a custom becomes rigid, it is almost impossible to break through it, just as in your country. you will find how hard it is to break through a 5-day custom of fashion. In the lower castes, except two, the widows remarry. There is a passage in our later law books which states that a woman shall not read the Vedas, but they are prohibited to even a weak Brahmin. If a Brahmin boy is not strong-minded, the law is applied to him also. But that does not show that education is prohibited to them, for the Vedas are not all that the Hindus have. Every other book women can read. All the mass of Sanskrit literature, that whole ocean of literature, science, drama, poetry, is all for them. They can go there and read everything except the Vedic scriptures. In later days, the idea was that woman was not intended to be a priest. So what is the use of her studying the Vedas? In that, the Hindus are not so far behind other nations. When women give up the world and join our order, they are no longer considered either men or women. They have no sex. The whole question of high or low caste, man or woman, dies out entirely. Whatever I know of religion, I learned from my master, and he learned it of a woman. Coming back to the Rajput woman, I will try to bring to you a story from some of our old books, how during the Mohammedan conquest, one of these women was the cause of what led to the conquest of India. A Rajput prince of Kannauj, a very ancient city, had a daughter, Samyukta. She had heard of the military fame of Prithvi Raj, king of Ajmer and Delhi, and all his glory, and she was in love with him. Now her father wanted to hold a Rajasuya sacrifice, so he invited all the kings in the country. And in that sacrifice, they all had to render menial service to him because he was superior over all. And with that sacrifice, he declared there would be a choice by his daughter. But the daughter was already in love with Prithvi Raj. He was very mighty and was not going to acknowledge loyalty to the king, her father, so he refused the invitation. Then the king made a golden statue of Prithvi Raj and put it near the door. He said that that was the duty he had given him to perform, that of a porter. The upshot of the whole affair was that Prithvi Raj, like a true knight, came and took the lady behind him on his horse, and they both fled. When the news came to her father, he gave chase with his army, and there was a great battle in which the majority of both armies was killed. And thus the Rajputs were so weakened that the Mohammedan Empire in India began. When the Mohammedan Empire was being established in northern India, the queen of Chittor, Rani Padmini, was famed for her beauty, and the report of her beauty reached the Sultan, and he wrote a letter for the queen to be sent to his harem. The result was a terrible war between the king of Chittor and the Sultan. The Mohammedans invaded Chittor, and when the Rajputs found they could not defend themselves anymore, the men all took sword in hand and killed and were killed, and the women perished in the flames. After the men had all perished, the conqueror entered the city. There in the street was rising a horrible flame. He saw circles of women going around it, led by the queen herself. When he approached near and asked the queen to refrain from jumping into the flames, she said, "This is how the Rajput woman treats you," and threw herself into the fire. It is said that 74,500 women perished in the flames that day to save their honor from the hands of the Mohammedans. Even today, when we write a letter, after sealing it, we write 74 and a half upon it, meaning that if one dares to open this letter, that sin of killing 74,500 women will be upon his head. I will tell you the story of another beautiful Rajput girl. There is a peculiar custom in our country called protection. Women can send small bracelets of silken thread to men, and if a girl sends one of these to a man, that man becomes her brother. During the reign of the last of the Mughal emperors, the cruel man who destroyed that most brilliant empire of India, he similarly heard of the beauty of a Rajput chieftain's daughter. Orders were sent that she should be brought to the Mughal harem. Then a messenger came from the emperor to her with his picture, and he showed it to her. In derision, she stamped upon it with her feet and said, "Thus the Rajput girl treats your Mughal emperor." As a result, the imperial army was marched into Rajputana. In despair, the chieftain's daughter thought of a device. She took a number of these bracelets and sent them to the Rajput princes with a message, "Come and help us." All the Rajputs assembled, and so the imperial forces had to go back again. I will tell you a peculiar proverb in Rajputana. There is a caste in India called the shop class, the traders. They are very intelligent, some of them, but the Hindus think they are rather sharp. but it is a peculiar fact that the women of that caste are not as intelligent as the men. On the other hand, the Rajput man is not half as intelligent as the Rajput woman. The common proverb in Rajputana is, "The intelligent woman begets the dull son, and the dull woman begets the sharp son." The fact is, whenever any state or kingdom in Rajputana has been managed by a woman, it has been managed wonderfully well. We come to another class of women. This mild Hindu race produces fighting women from time to time. Some of you may have heard of the woman Lakshmi Bai, Queen of Jhansi, who during the mutiny of 1857 fought against the English soldiers and held her own ground for 2 years, leading modern armies, managing batteries, and always charging at the head of her army. This queen was a Brahmin girl. A man whom I know lost 3 of his sons in that war. When he talks of them, he is calm, but when he talks of this woman, his voice becomes animated. He used to say that she was a goddess. She was not a human being. This old veteran thinks he never saw better generalship. The story of Chand Bibi or Chand Sultana, 1546 to 1599, is well known in India. She was the queen of Golconda, where the diamond mines were. For months she defended herself. At last, a breach was made in the walls. When the imperial army tried to rush in there, she was in full armor, and she forced the troops to go back. In still later times, perhaps you will be astonished to know that a great English general had once to face a Hindu girl of 16. Women in statesmanship, managing territories, governing countries, even making war, have proved themselves equal to men, if not superior. In India, I have no doubt of that. Whenever they have had the opportunity, they have proved that they have as much ability as men, with this advantage, that they seldom degenerate. They keep to the moral standard, which is innate in their nature, and thus as governors and rulers of their state, they prove, at least in India, far superior to men. John Stuart Mill mentions this fact. Even at the present day, we see women in India managing vast estates with great ability. There were 2 ladies where I was born who were the proprietors of large estates and patronesses of learning and art, and who managed these estates with their own brains and looked to every detail of the business. Each nation, beyond a general humanity, develops a certain peculiarity of character. So in religion, so in politics, so in the physical body, so in mental habitude, so in men and women, so in character. One nation develops one peculiarity of character, another takes another peculiarity. Within the last few years, the world has begun to recognize this. The very peculiarity of Hindu women, which they have developed and which is the idea of their life, is that of the mother. If you enter a Hindu's home, you will not find the wife to be the same equal companion of the husband as you find her here. But when you find the mother, she is the very pillar of the Hindu home. The wife must wait to become the mother, and then she will be everything. If one becomes a monk, his father will have to salute him first because he has become a monk and is therefore superior to him. But to his mother, he, monk or no monk, will have to go down on his knees and prostrate himself before her. He will then put a little cup of water before her feet. She will dip her toe in it, and he will have to drink of it. A Hindu son gladly does this 1,000 times over again. Where the Vedas teach morality, the first words are, "Let the mother be your God," and that she is. When we talk of woman in India, our idea of woman is mother. The value of women consists in their being mothers of the human race. That is the idea of the Hindu. I have seen my old master taking little girls by the hands, placing them in a chair and actually worshipping them, placing flowers at their feet and prostrating himself before these little children, because they represented the mother god. The mother is the god in our family. The idea is that the only real love that we see in the world, the most unselfish love, is in the mother, always suffering, always loving. And what love can represent the love of God more than the love which we see in the mother? Thus, the mother is the incarnation of God on earth to the Hindu. That boy alone can understand God who has been first taught by his mother. I have heard wild stories about the illiteracy of our women. Till I was a boy of 10, I was taught by my mother. I saw my grandmother living and my great-grandmother living. And I assure you that there never was in my line a female ancestor who could not read or write, or who had to put her mark on a paper. If there was a woman who could not read or write, my birth would have been impossible. Caste laws make it imperative. So these are wild stories which I sometimes hear, such as the statement that in the Middle Ages reading and writing were taken away from Hindu women. I refer you to Sir William Hunter's History of the English People, where he cited Indian women who could calculate a solar eclipse. I have been told that either too much worship of the mother makes the mother selfish, or too much love of the children for the mother makes them selfish. But I do not believe that. The love which my mother gave to me has made me what I am, and I owe a debt to her that I can never repay. Why should the Hindu mother be worshipped? Our philosophers try to find a reason, and they come to this definition. We call ourselves the Aryan race. What is an Aryan? He is a man whose birth is through religion. This is a peculiar subject perhaps in this country, but the idea is that a man must be born through religion, through prayers. If you take up our law books, you will find chapters devoted to this, the prenatal influence of a mother on the child. I know that before I was born, my mother would fast and pray and do hundreds of things which I could not even do for 5 minutes. She did that for 2 years. I believe that whatever religious culture I have, I owe to that. It was consciously that my mother brought me into the world to be what I am. Whatever good impulse I have was given to me by my mother, and consciously, not unconsciously. A child materially born is not an Aryan. The child born in spirituality is an Aryan. For all this trouble, because she has to make herself so pure and holy in order to have pure children, she has a peculiar claim on the Hindu child. And the rest of her traits is the same with all other nations. She is so unselfish, but the mother has to suffer most in our families. The mother has to eat last. I have been asked many times in your country why the Hindu husband does not sit with his wife to eat, if the idea is perhaps that the husband thinks she is too low a being. This explanation is not at all right. You know, a hog's hair is thought to be very unclean. A Hindu cannot brush his teeth with the brushes made of it, so he uses the fiber of plants. Some travelers saw one Hindu brushing his teeth with that and then wrote that a Hindu gets up early in the morning and gets a plant and chews it and swallows it. Similarly, some have seen the husband and wife not eating together and have made their own explanation. There are so many explainers in this world and so few observers, as if the world is dying for their explanations. That is why I sometimes think the invention of printing was not an unmixed blessing. The real fact is, just as in your country many things must not be done by ladies before men, so in our country the fact is that it is very indecorous to munch and munch before men. If a lady is eating, she may eat before her brothers, but if the husband comes in, she stops immediately and the husband walks out quickly. We have no tables to sit at, and whenever a man is hungry he comes in and takes his meal and goes out. Do not believe that a Hindu husband does not allow his wife to sit at the table with him. He has no table at all. The first part of the food, when it is ready, belongs to the guests and the poor, the second to the lower animals, the third to the children, the fourth to the husband, and last comes the mother. How many times I have seen my mother going to take her first meal when it was 2 o'clock. She took ours at 10 and she at 2 because she had so many things to attend to. For example, someone knocks at the door and says, "Guest," and there is no food except what was for my mother. She would give that to him willingly and then wait for her own. That was her life and she liked it. And that is why we worship mothers as gods. I wish you would like less to be merely petted and patronized and more to be worshipped. You, a member of the human race, the poor Hindu does not understand that inclination of yours. But when you say, "We are mothers and we command," he bows down. This is the side, then, that the Hindus have developed. Going back to our theories, people in the West came about 100 years ago to the point that they must tolerate other religions. But we know now that toleration is not sufficient toward another religion. We must accept it. Thus it is not a question of subtraction, it is a question of addition. The truth is the result of all these different sides added together. Each of all these religions represents one side, the fullness being the addition of all these. And so in every science it is addition that is the law. Now the Hindu has developed this side, but will this side be enough? Let the Hindu woman who is the mother become the worthy wife also, but do not try to destroy the mother. That is the best thing you can do. Thus, you get a better view of the universe instead of going about all over the world, rushing into different nations and criticizing them and saying, "The horrid wretches, all fit to be barbecued for eternity." If we take our stand on this position, that each nation under the Lord's will is developing one part of human nature, no nation is a failure. So far they have done well, now they must do better. Instead of calling the Hindus heathens, wretches, slaves, go to India and say, "So far your work is wonderful, but that is not all. You have much more to do. God bless you that you have developed this side of woman as a mother. Now help the other side, the wife of men." And similarly, I think I tell it with the best spirit that you had better add to your national character a little more of the mother side of the Hindu nature. This was the first verse that I was taught in my life, the first day I went to school. He indeed is a learned man who looks upon all women as his mother, who looks upon every man's property as so much dust, and looks upon every being as his own soul. There is the other idea of the woman working with the man. It is not that the Hindus had not those ideals, but they could not develop them. It is alone in the Sanskrit language that we find 4 words meaning husband and wife together. It is only in our marriage that they both promise, "What has been my heart, now may be thine." It is there that we see that the husband is made to look at the pole star touching the hand of his wife and saying, "As the pole star is fixed in the heavens, so may I be fixed in my affection to thee." And the wife does the same. Even a woman who is vile enough to go into the streets can sue her husband and have a maintenance. We find the germs of these ideas in all our books throughout our nation, but we were not able to develop that side of the character. We must go far beyond sentiment when we want to judge. We know it is not emotion alone that governs the world, but there is something behind emotion. Economic causes, surrounding circumstances, and other considerations enter into the development of nations. It is not in my present plan to go into the causes that develop woman as wife. So in this world, as each nation is placed under peculiar circumstances and is developing its own type, the day is coming when all these different types will be mixed up, when that wild sort of patriotism, which means rob everybody and give to me, will vanish. Then there will be no more one-sided development in the whole world, and each one of these nations will see that they had done right. Let us now go to work and mix the nations up together and let the new nation come. Will you let me tell you my conviction? Much of the civilization that comprises the world today has come from that one peculiar race of mankind, the Aryans. Aryan civilization has been of 3 types: the Roman, the Greek, the Hindu. The Roman type is the type of organization, conquest, steadiness, but lacking in emotional nature, appreciation of beauty, and the higher emotions. Its defect is cruelty. The Greek is essentially enthusiastic for the beautiful, but frivolous and has a tendency to become immoral. The Hindu type is essentially metaphysical and religious, but lacking in all the elements of organization and work. The Roman type is now represented by the Anglo-Saxon, the Greek type more by the French than by any other nation, and the old Hindus do not die. Each type has its advantage in this new land of promise. They have the Romans' organization, the power of the Greeks' wonderful love for the beautiful, and the Hindus' backbone of religion and love of God. Mix these up together and bring in the new civilization. And let me tell you, this should be done by women. There are some of our books which say that the next incarnation, and the last, we believe in 10, is to come in the form of a woman. We see resources in the world yet remaining because all the forces that are in the world have not come into use. The hand was acting all this time while other parts of the body were remaining silent. Let the other parts of the body be awakened, and perhaps in harmonious action all the misery will be cured. Perhaps in this new land, with this new blood in your veins, you may bring in that new civilization, and perhaps through American women. As to that ever-blessed land which gave me this body, I look back with great veneration and bless the merciful being who permitted me to take birth in that holiest spot on earth. When the whole world is trying to trace its ancestry from men distinguished in arms or wealth, the Hindus alone are proud to trace their descent from saints. That wonderful vessel which has been carrying for ages men and women across this ocean of life may have sprung small leaks here and there, and of that too, the Lord alone knows how much is owing to themselves and how much to those who look down with contempt upon the Hindus. But if such leaks there are, I, the meanest of her children, think it my duty to stop her from sinking, even if I have to do it with my life. And if I find that all my struggles are in vain, still, as the Lord is my witness, I will tell them with my heartfelt benediction, My brethren, you have done well, nay, better than any other race could have done under the same circumstances. You have given me all that I have. Grant me the privilege of being at your side to the last, and let us all sink together.